The final score, Wrexham 2, Eastleigh 1, and as Roger Daltrey said, meet the new season, same as the old season. Wrexham showed a familiar mixture of quality and heart to come out with 3 points from this opening game of the season, just like we did throughout last season. The class was given, well, particularly by Elliot Lee, who came off the bench to have an absolutely magnificent debut. But it wasn't just him, of course. Wrexham kept their cool. And it felt quite odd, I've got to be honest, to be watching a Wrexham team of less than 20 minutes left who were losing and having a just pretty confident sense that we would win this game. That's what the Wrexham team has given to us from last season, an unshakable faith both amongst themselves and amongst the fans who stick with them brilliantly all through this match that we will get through eventually. Elliot Lee is just the icing on the cake. So to start off, Phil Parkinson began his second season in charge of Wrexham with the side that beat Macclesfield in our pre-season friendly last Saturday, which is no huge surprise. Jordan Davis and Elliot Lee on the bench because both of them had injuries in our rather short pre-season and were lacking match fitness and sharpness. The bench in general told a story. Rory Watson was there, having been brought in hurriedly as a temporary fix after Wrexham lost Christian Dibble to injury at Carnarvon. And apart from Lee and Davis, there were of course 2 potential debutants in Benjamin Mendy and Sam Dalby. The Wrexham side that was selected started well and looked confident. Eastleigh have brought in some interesting players, but they really underperformed last season, and one would assume their first priority is just to make sure they don't get relegated. And they immediately came looking like a side who firstly didn't want to concede unnecessarily. They were keeping it extremely tight, but they weren't terribly adventurous. First chance Wrexham had was in the 11th minute. Oh, and the irony began. Ben Tozer with a long throw-in. Aaron Hayden leaping typically, but it came more off his shoulder than anything else. Bounced loose. Mullen hit a shot which was blocked. Why is that ironic? Well, their last pre-season game for Eastleigh was organised against a side with a long throw because they wanted to condition themselves and deal with Tozer's long throw-ins. Well, they just about dealt with that one, and 3 minutes later they scored with a long throw-in. It was not a great moment, in all honesty. Panther flinging the ball in. Mark Howard got underneath it, could only get a hand to it, and Langston lunged to poke the ball into the net. And there's no way of dressing this up. It was an error by Mark Howard. Let's not jump to judgment on him because it's his first match and all goalkeepers make mistakes. But I think he got a little bit tied up with the fact that Tristan Abrahams, the striker for Eastleigh, was standing in front of him, and I think he became a little bit fixated with making sure he was in front of Abrahams, and then when the throw-in came in, he realised he'd actually got too close to the ball. He got underneath it and it soared over his head. He could only paw at it, and Langston lunged in to finish the job. So Wrexham a goal behind. Now credits to Wrexham, and we did see this a lot last season. Going behind was not a huge concern. There was still a lot of time left in the match, and Wrexham resumed where they left off. However, Eastleigh were now inspired by the fact that they'd actually got a goal. I mean, they'd come thinking that a 0-0 would be fine and anything else they could snatch would be lovely. And now all of a sudden, they had the advantage and they really had an incentive to battle against us. And in the first half, I thought that their organisation and defence was good. They played a sort of broken team. So 5 at the back, which really sort of did become 5 at the back. The 2 wing-backs never went forwards at the same time. Cisse sat in front of them, a massive, destructive midfielder. And then the 2 other midfielders and their 2 strikers were given leave to push up and press Wrexham a bit. But Wrexham could pass through that press quite easily, and as a result had complete control of possession, complete control of midfield. But because he didn't drop off too deep in the first half, it was difficult to create chances apart from set pieces. And Che Long, my co-commentator on Wrexham Player, constantly repeated the point that they got their game plan right, that this was a good template of how to play against Wrexham. And I agree. They were well organised. Individuals did their jobs well at the back. Harper at left wing back was excellent, and they caused problems. They were also unbelievably cynical. And Scott Jackson, the referee, well, made a rod for his own back. You all know I gripe about it all the time. This notion that in the first half hour you're just not going to book anybody. I don't get it. A foul is a foul is a foul. There's nothing in the rules saying let people off at the first half hour. Eastleigh were very, very cynical, and as not for the first time, it's got to be said. And I think they saw quite quickly that Scott Jackson wasn't going to be giving cards out early on, and took that as a carte blanche to really double down and make sure that they were cynical throughout. I think they paid for that in the second half, but more of that later. But in the first half, there were a lot of tactical fouls. There was a terrific amount of time wasting. As early as the 6th minute, they took ages over a throw-in and then left it to a different person. There was a lot of play acting as well, going down, asking for the treatment, or, as I'll get to in a moment, going down, trying to get a Wrexham player sent off. It was unpleasant, and it wasn't until nearly half an hour was gone that the first yellow card was shown. And I think maybe Scott Jackson, the referee, regretted that. Like I said, more of that in the second half. But Wrexham, like I said, kept their cool, but found it hard to break down this organised rearguard. McFadden sweeping in across to the far post, an absolute beauty. And there was Ford on his debut attacking it. Harper did brilliantly to get between man and ball. He's not as big a man as Ford and get contact on it, but he inadvertently looped it over his goalkeeper with his miscontacted header. It floated over him, and Martin, the central centre-back, did brilliantly to get back and somehow head the ball over his own bar, even though he was pretty much on his own line. Then came a blow to Wrexham. Tom O'Connor's quality of passing was always going to be useful in breaking down a team like Eastleigh, but he took a knock from a challenge by Cisse and had to go off. Hopefully it's just a dead leg or something like that, and he'll be back in contention quickly. Jordan Davis then had to come on as early as the 19th minute, and Davis had an excellent game. He was constantly driving forwards, constantly trying to make things happen, and, well, he certainly looks match sharp. I've got to say, Elliot Lee is the other one who we were concerned about with match sharpness, and he had no problem. But Davis's first contribution was an excellent ball over the top. Nearly sent Mullen one-on-one with the keeper. McConnell just managed to get off his line in time and beat the Wrexham striker to it. Then there was some skullduggery from Eastleigh. We'd already seen Brendan Camp, their right wing back, barge into two Wrexham players. The ref didn't penalise either challenge. Ball went out for a throw. Camp clattered into the second Wrexham player he barged into, Callum McFadden, and then as McFadden tried to get up, Camp clamped his legs onto McFadden so that McFadden couldn't get free. McFadden tried to pull his leg away, and in doing so gave Camp an opportunity to pretend he'd been stamped on. The referee, I think, saw through it all, to be fair. He seemed to give Camp a real dressing down. Although, admittedly, he didn't do anything when Camp unbelievably did the same thing against McFadden 2 minutes later. But the tone had been set, and a really unpleasant incident had happened between the target man, Danny Whitehall, and Ben Tozer, where Tozer dealt with things. Whitehall ended up dumped on the floor because Tozer was too strong for him in the penalty area. After the ball had gone, Whitehall lashed out at Tozer, who ill-advisedly turned round and retaliated. However, he retaliated with a sort of chest-to-chest movement, and Whitehall flung himself to the floor, holding his face, pretending he'd been butted, and hoping to con the referee and get a red card for Tozer. Now, to the credit of the referee, when it happened, he was turning around looking at it, and he pointed at it, but carried on playing, saying, I saw that, and clearly not seeing it as a red card, because if he had, he'd have stopped play then and sent Tozer off. Although he did then stop Wrexham's move just as they were about to deliver a ball into the box from a really good position, which annoyed the crowd, and quite frankly, rightly annoyed the crowd, because really, he should have carried on. By this point, Whitehall was starting to get to his feet. So there was something of a sour taste as the game was developing. Wrexham continued to push on, Young sweeping in a corner, Palmer getting up well but planting his header just wide of the right-hand post. The subsequent goal kick was wonderful because as McConnell, for the umpteenth time, wasted time over it, the Wrexham fans started to count how many seconds he'd taken. They got up to 24. They kept doing this for quite a while as well in the match. That's the most they got to, but they were regularly getting up to 20. I think that might have just made a bit of a point to the referee. It was a brilliant work by the fans. Wrexham had one more chance in added time, the 4th minute of added time in the first half. Another young corner swept in. Again, Palmer won the header. Again, didn't quite get the contact he wanted, and the ball glanced off his head across the face and just wide. At the far post, Mullen came lunging in, looking to prod it into an empty net, and hit the deck and was screaming for a penalty. And I've got to say, having looked at the replays, I think he had a strong case. He was in front of an open goal. He'd have had to stretch to get there, but there was definitely an arm grabbing him. Now, whether he accentuated the contact or not, it's one of those where, when a defender sticks their arm out to grab somebody who's about to score, it's they're asking to be penalised, aren't they? It would have been a red as well if the ref had given it, because it wasn't a tackle. But anyway, the ref didn't give it. I think he was mistaken. And at half-time, Wrexham were behind. Now, Wrexham came out aggressively. Within a minute, and Mullen had gone close. Davis again carrying the ball forwards well, feeding Mullen on the edge of the D. We've seen him do this before. He shifted it out onto his right foot and just had a delicate little curler into the top right corner. Keeper was unsighted and wasn't able to get to it, and it just grazed the bar. Then Jordan Davis had a free kick, which he drilled in, and McCallum lunged to his right and pushed it behind for a corner. I think McCallum was quite intelligent. It was certainly in shooting range, but he only had a 3-man wall. You normally, with Jordan Davis especially, have more men in the wall than that. But having that small wall allowed McConnell to see the ball early. He took a maybe more central position than he normally would, because he felt he could react either way, and he got down to behind the wall on the right-hand side and pushed it away. The corner was swept in and led to a massive scramble, which ended with the ball coming out to the edge of the box and Jones's shot being really well blocked. And then Jones had to make way. Now, James Jones was putting a good shift in midfield, but we needed a bit more inspiration. And so the turning point of the match, 63rd minute, on for his debut came Elliot Lee. And immediately he was looking threatening. Now, I've got to hold my hands up here. I'm a little naturally prejudiced against tricky wingers. I just worry that they look fancy, but they have no end product. But if you're watching the video, you can see just next to me there a picture of Lee putting in a cross. And this is the instant I'm aiming up to. The first time Lee got the ball, almost immediately after he'd come on, he span nicely, beat his man. He actually lost the ball, but it ricocheted to Mullen, who did ever so well to beat 2 men running through the middle. Now, I've got to emphasise, Eastleigh are very crowded at the back, and he never really had control. It wasn't really skill that was beating them, it was sheer determination. And then off balance on the edge of the area, stabbed a shot which he couldn't put on target. But it was good spirit. It was good heart, and Lee had got into a dangerous position. And Lee continued to look threatening. The first time he ran at a man, he did an awful lot of changes of direction and then didn't really get anywhere. And I thought, oh, okay, please don't be one of these guys who's a bit of a show pony, looks all fancy, but is there any end product? Well, the second time that he got the ball and tried this was the picture I was referring to a moment ago. He broke down the left, was going one way then the other, one way then the other, bamboozled the full-back and then burst past him and stood up a glorious cross to the far post, which Palmer headed wide from the corner of the 6-yard box. He probably should have done better. There was also a scramble in the goal mouth, which Lee ended with a powerful shot, which was blocked. But Lee had brought a little bit extra, that little X factor, and Wrexham was starting to look threatening. He's two-footed, and he can go either way past a man. And all of a sudden, Camp was panicking, not sure exactly how to handle him when he broke down the flank. Wrexham readied another substitution, Jacob Mondi, to come on for Callum McFadden. But as he waited to come on for his debut, Wrexham got the equaliser, and McFadden got a stay of execution, not least because he played a part in the goal. There was a lovely move down the left, started off by Ollie Palmer just driving determinedly down the flank, drawing men to him. He was completely outnumbered, down a cul-de-sac, but not only did he relieve pressure on Wrexham, but he really did well to refuse to lose the ball and battle away. He held her up and then he started to link with Lee and with McFadden. The passing on the left was excellent. The movement was excellent. McFadden fizzed in an excellently weighted, high-pace ball to really move things forwards into the box. Palmer receiving the ball with his back to the corner flag, looked to be making his way out of the area, then cutely backheeled it to Lee on the overlap. And Lee, what a finish. I mean, I've got to be honest, it's such a sharp finish. that when I watched the replay, I didn't expect it to go in, and I thought there was another touch, but there wasn't. And that's the whole point. It was backheel to him, and from about 15 yards out, very wide on the left, he just ripped a wonderful curler beyond the keeper and inside the far post. It wasn't snugly inside the far post, but it didn't have to be because he took it so early. Like I say, when I watched the replay, I didn't expect it to hit it, even though I knew he was going to. I thought he would take another touch. The keeper's not had a chance to set himself. Lee knows this, and he knows if he takes it early like that and gets it outside the keeper, he's probably not going to react in time. Not just a beautiful goal in terms of technique, but a fantastic goal in terms of awareness in the penalty area. And players who are that aware in the penalty area, of course, are worth their weight in gold. Wrexham continued to push on, looking for the winner. There was one nerve-wracking moment, actually, although it didn't count in the end, when a shot by Abrams slammed against the post and there was a terrific scramble in the goal mouth, but the flag was up before Abrams shot. It was a tight call, but it meant none of it actually mattered. Mundy did come on from McFadden and looked lively, and then in the 85th minute, Wrexham got the reward. Again, patient build-up play, again, confident passing, playing the ball to crowded areas. In the second half, Eastleigh, until this point, had really sat deep. Unlike in the first half, too deep, I would argue. They left two men up this time, and the midfield basically were just an auxiliary line in front of the defence. It was like defence against attack for long periods, and they defended with discipline. Again, Che called them the Orange Wall, and that was a good description of them. They really stood up to the task and battled and defended bravely, got their blocks in. But in the end, once Lee had come on, a player with a bit of craft who could, in a small space, cause damage, they were done for because they were sitting deep and waiting for him to do something. This was a lovely move, nice snappy passing. It ended with an excellent pass by Mullen, only a short pass, but an accurate one from the edge of the D to Lee about 10 yards out, who pinned his man, made a bit of space and then drilled it past McConnell, who, in all honesty, if he'd stood up, would have saved it. But to be honest as well, he'd seen what Lee could do. He knew that Lee was unpredictable, and he gambled a bit to go to his left, and he was wrong, and Lee slammed in what would turn out to be the winner. I said about the referee playing a role. Well, this is where he did. There were some wonderful little moments here. One of Eastleigh's time-wasting stunts was Abram, after the goal, just making his way to the corner flag and walking very slowly to the halfway line just to make sure that the restart was massively delayed. So imagine everyone's delight when Ollie Palmer did exactly the same thing after Wrexham got the second goal. He took an eternity to get to the halfway line. It took a good minute out of the game. There was a substitution at the same time. Brilliantly, he stopped when there was a substitution. There was also, and I didn't see this, my sons told me about this, a nice bit of time wasting by Tozer afterwards, who went down off the ball, and then when he saw the reference look and jumped straight back up again. Eastleigh were getting done to them at the end what they'd been doing for the entire match, and it was deeply satisfying to see that form of revenge. There was also a comical moment where Mullen went down claiming he had cramp. Now, in the second half, the Eastleigh players have been constantly going down claiming they had cramp. And this is where I think, to be honest, I think the ref had learned his lesson from the first half. He'd allowed them to have a bit of leeway to be cynical, but I think he realised that they were taking the mick out of him. And in the second half, he was a lot less lenient with them. They were constantly dropping to the floor, claiming cramp, and he wouldn't let the physio on for any of them. He just told them to get up and get on with it. I think he felt they'd made a bit of a fool of him, and he wasn't going to let them do it again. And in the second half, I think he controlled things very well. It was quite amusing that when Mullen went down with cramp, the referee came across and treated him himself, grabbing his leg and pushing his toes. It was just great. The referee almost in on the joke of, yeah, I'm not going to buck you. You're doing what they did. I'll let you off. And maybe for me, the most decisive piece of evidence that the referee had seen through Eastleigh and decided they weren't going to make fools of him was that he only added 4 minutes on at the end. Now, you know, if I had more time, I'd just go through that second half of the stopwatch and see how much time Eastleigh actually wasted, because it would have been a considerable amount of time. Yes, he only had 4 minutes on. And let's be honest, we went ahead in the 85th minute, and we then started really wasting time. I thought he was going to add about 8 minutes on. And I genuinely think the referee felt Eastleigh made him look foolish. He wasn't going to let him get away with it. And once they'd gone behind, he thought, well, Eastleigh wasted that time. I'm not going to give it back to them. Probably 4 minutes is the least I can get away with. I'll just say that. It was way under what it should have been. But I think a little bit of subtle referee's revenge there, which helped Wrexham out. Although, to be fair, we had no problem seeing the game out. Eastleigh had only really created one chance, that long throw in, and that came from a defensive error. They didn't have much up front, and as a result, Wrexham comfortably held out in the end for that 2-1 win. A smashing result, because it's just always good to get a result on the open day. Doesn't matter if you have to fight for it or not, you just got to get it. Individual performances, well, Howard had an unfortunate debut, of course. He made that mistake. He fumbled one in the second half as well. And he also dropped across when he was fouled. He definitely was smashed into. I just worry that added to the sort of narrative of he's fumbling the ball, and the fact is that he couldn't help dropping it the third time. But there's a little narrative there that he's going to have to overcome. The Wrexham fans, you could hear, were a bit uneasy when his handling wasn't quite right. So he's an experienced keeper and a good signing, I think. But I think he just has to get over that hump and show the Wrexham fans what he can actually do. Across the back, three centre-backs all were excellent. Aaron Hayden, a number of times, extinguished threat before it could really develop. Tozer was comfortable in the middle of the three. Made a couple of errors early on, actually, but soon was back to being strong and reliable. Cleworth was superb, I thought, again. I mean, he's got pressure on his position from Jordan Tunnicliffe, but he looked excellent. He really was strong in the challenge. Whitehall, a target man, I think, like so many teams have tried to target him. Cleworth dominated him in the end. Whitehall was taken off a good distance before the end. So, yeah, really impressive from him. On the flanks, Anthony Ford, I thought, had a tidy game. I would have liked maybe to have seen him take on the fullback Harper a little bit more. To be fair, I think maybe Harper was Eastleigh's best player, though. He did exceptionally well on the left-hand side, so maybe Ford's a little unlucky. On the left, Callum McFadden, I thought, had a very good game, actually. He was solid defensively. He brought the ball forwards effectively as well. Mondi came on, I think, just because the guy could really attack. So it made sense to have him on at a point where we're trying to grab a winner. But I thought McFadden had a solid game. In midfield, again, like I said, James Jones put in his excellent shift that he always does, but maybe we needed a little more creativity, and it was a good move to bring Leon when we did. Luke Young did really well again, always in the middle of everything, again anchoring that midfield and getting involved and linking things up. And then Tom O'Connor, well, didn't get much of a chance to get into the game before he was injured, sadly, and let's hope he's okay. And then up front, well, Mullen had a bit of a frustrating afternoon. He didn't really get the chance to influence the game as much as he'd like to. He maybe could have won a penalty. He had a couple of half chances, but he was there when we needed him. He was there to play that neat little ball into the box for the second goal, and he was working as hard as ever. So fair play to Mullen. Didn't quite fall for him, but he still showed his worth. And Palmer, I thought, especially as the game developed in the second half, was very influential. Held the ball up well, fought for the ball well. That battle of attrition, wearing down the centre-backs and just forcing them deeper and deeper. Because ultimately, it was Eastleigh's dropping deep in the second half, I think, that really won the game and allowed Lee the platform to perform from. And his carrying of the ball for that first goal was excellent. When Lee came on, he was a bit like when Glenn Little used to come on for Wrexham. Players wanted to play with him, and Palmer was central to that. It was very good. Off the bench, like I said, Davis was excellent. He did really well. Was very influential. Lee won the match. Mondi looked lively. Didn't have much time to show anything. An excellent result. An excellent win. And Wrexham, we've started as we mean to go on. We've never won our first two games in the National League. It'd be brilliant if we could break that record and then go on to make this our last season in the National League, wouldn't it? With a final score of Wrexham 2, Eastleigh 1, I'm Mark Griffiths from Wrexham AFC.